This is Randy Sullivan, the host of Bourbon Real Talk. I grew up in a small town and went to a small church where everyone looked and thought like me. Over the years, I've gotten to know and love people from all different walks of life. This has made my world bigger and richer. The secret ingredient in forming those relationships was getting to know people's real stories. That helped me to identify with them, have compassion on them, and eventually develop a real connection with them. We live in a disconnected world today, and I want to do everything in my power to build connections between individuals who may not have attempted friendship otherwise. I've observed this happening in the bourbon community on its own because whiskey naturally brings people together. Bourbon Real Talk hopes to combine the world's new passion for bourbon into an opportunity to bring people together. We will share some whiskey knowledge, some good drams, and some real talk. So sit back, pour a drink, and open your hearts and minds. You might just find yourself feeling more connected to the people in the world around you, all fueled by bourbon. Hello, everybody out there in Bourbon Real Talk land. Randy Sullivan coming to you today for an episode that might be a little more heavy than what we normally do. Sometimes it's just for, shits and giggles. Sometimes it's for educational purposes. Sometimes it's to create connection. But I have my good friend Tanner Flemming here, who is... is it fair to say you're a card-carrying progressive?
Yes.
He is a card-carrying progressive.
Fair to say that.
And given the number of mass shootings that we've had recently, my heart's just broken. And I don't know what we're supposed to do. Like, I don't know what the right thing is, but I can't hear another story about, somebody's, getting gunned down while they protect their newborn, or some, child being shot in a school, and hopes and prayers. And that's it. That's fucking it. We're going to get hopes and, you're going to be in our thoughts and prayers. No, something has to happen.
Well, it's a horrible way to find out that anyone even goes to a garlic festival.
Right.
I wouldn't even have thought there was such a thing. And then to find out that, what was it, a 2-year-old, 6-year-old or whatever. I can't keep track of the, at Walmart in El Paso, I think it was the 2-year-old and it was a 6-year-old at the garlic festival. And I have a 6-year-old daughter. So, yeah. And you have children. And
my children have been to that garlic festival before.
Yeah.
My friends live in Fresno, California. And they always go to Gilroy Gardens every time we travel there. I don't think my son went, but my daughter went with my wife a couple of years ago. And, it just hits closer to home. But, we have to understand that there are people that, it wasn't hey, one time 2 years ago I went there. There were people that were there. And there are people that were there and went home with less than the people that they showed up with.
Yeah.
Right. And so... just to keep it the regular show format, things have already gotten kind of dark. I'm already teared up. Probably going to cry. If you don't like that, fuck off.
I will not.
I don't know what to tell you. We are going to drink some Master's Keep 17-year. So I think this was 4 releases ago, because they had the decades after this one.
And the Oloroso.
And now the
rye.
Cornerstone.
Yeah.
It's Cornerstone's the rye, right?
Yep.
So, and Eddie Russell's name is right on the front of this box. One of my heroes who probably no longer likes me on account of my banana comment in a barrel selection, which has been well documented in the whiskey clubs. But I am a huge turkey fan. And this one of the newer releases is probably one of my favorites, which is a little bit surprising because as a 17-year, it's a little oakier for me.
Yeah.
So what do you get on the nose, Tanner?
I just get like a lot of like cinnamon, vanilla, just that expected.
Right.
Wild
Nothing
jerky.
shocking.
Nothing crazy shocking.
What I'm getting that's because I can smell the oak and the tannins, and I can smell a little bit of a oak smoke.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a little bit of a citrus component for me that's like maybe an orange peel and potentially like a peach or an apricot or something. There's a little bit of a fruit
You know what I
component.
get a lot of?
What?
Bourbon.
Bourbon. I'm getting a ton of bourbon on this. And you know what I'm getting zero of, Eddie Russell? Banana. I'm not getting any banana.
No banana on this one.
Yeah. Although if we ran this through a gas spectrometer, we would find that it had isoamyl acetate in it, just probably not enough for me to detect it. So, okay.
I always just with turkey I feel like I can always pick turkey out of a blind lineup because there's almost, and they don't tell you what the mash bill is, but it's almost like it's got a higher malt component.
Okay.
Almost like if you've had the Russell's 2002, it almost has a little bit of a single malt kind of a quality.
And I'm really bad at detecting that because I've had people like the best examples like, Balcony single malt, which is made exactly the way whiskeys are made in Scotland, except for it's not peated.
Yeah.
And people say, "Oh, this tastes like Scotch to me," and I'm like, I'm not getting that because my palate's I just don't detect that. The other thing I don't typically detect is turkey funk. Although the other day,
has some of that.
I was in your place of business. I ordered a Russell's Pick, and when it came out, as soon as I tasted it, I said, "There's something wrong. Like this is really musty and funky."
Yeah.
And I was with Ernie, who knows turkey very well. He tasted it and he goes, "Oh, they brought you CNA. You ordered CNF."
No, it was the other way around.
Or whatever it was.
That Camp Nelson Warehouse F.
And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then that was the first time I truly tasted turkey funk. And then they ended up bringing me the other one that I thought I had ordered, and I could taste it. It was much less.
It's more subdued.
More subdued, and I could taste it. And then as I drank water and I ate things and I sipped it, went away, and I haven't been able to really taste that turkey funk since. So I don't know. I'm not, whatever it is about that, my palate's not sensitive to it. But on the palate, there's not hardly any fruit for me.
No, a lot of leather. And it's a tannic.
Yeah, there's like a tannic funk, leather, maybe like some pipe tobacco or like some smoke, something like that, but not a lot of fruit component. Like I got a little bit of fruit on the nose, but honestly, I just make this shit up, people. Anyways, so moving on. So the history between Tanner and I, I met him through his work, which we're not going to talk about, but that's how we originally met. And then we kind of hooked up in Facebook groups and whiskey clubs. And one time a few years ago, after one of the
Parkland,
was it Parkland? So after shooting, again, back then I was watching the news all the time. And, full disclosure, I stopped watching the news. I've seen very little coverage about the recent shootings just because I see no benefit to consuming that information. There's so much misinformation in the news these days. I don't trust what I'm being told, and it doesn't bring any change, right? It's just sensationalizing, emotional, heartbreaking things, and it upsets me. So, but back then I was watching the news pretty much all day, every day while I was working, and I was just brokenhearted. And I started thinking about like, what could we do? Like, what could we do to maybe not stop this, because I don't know if you set out with the goal that we have to prevent it 100% of the time, then you're going to end up doing nothing.
Yeah.
And so I said, what would I be willing, what rights that I perceive that I have as a, American with the right to bear arms, what rights would I be willing to set aside? How could I protect those rights for myself while also doing the maximum possible to stop this from happening, right? And I wrote a Facebook post, which mostly my Facebook is just real estate related content and, pictures of me with my customers and stuff like that. But every so often I'll get on there and I'll write something that's political. But I try to be open-minded and not alienate anybody when I talk about those types of things. And that actually sparked you and I having a more personal relationship.
Because I don't get into it on Facebook. I don't write about it on Facebook. You have a guy that's in Missouri that is a friend of a friend that you're Facebook friends with that starts, talking shit. And you're like, bro, there's nothing to be gained from arguing politics and craziness on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think arguing, there's nothing to be gained by that. And I think some people that might watch this know me well enough to know, I'll have a conversation with anyone about this, anyone. And as long as you come to the table and we don't say always, we don't say never, and we don't say stupid. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's hard, but we don't use the negatives and we don't use conversation ending phrases. Then we can talk and discuss and at least see each other's views. Then that's what we should be doing. I was raised, you never talk about religion or politics, and come through my life, I'm like, we should absolutely talk about both.
Right.
You have conversations. We should absolutely talk about both because no one gets anywhere without conversation.
Well, and I think that the problem is what's become popular now that social media has infiltrated virtually everyone's lives is not to not talk about religion or politics, but to only talk about these issues with people that you agree with.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy. I can unfriend people at the best of them.
Right.
If you only do that, you only have friends on Facebook that are of your, beliefs, then somebody wins the presidency and you go, how the hell did this happen? Everyone I know. And it's like, well, yeah, everyone but not everyone else. And so, you have to have people in your life that, man, they might even call you on your bullshit.
Right.
Or, give you another perspective, or, I think your group of friends in life should be more diverse than oftentimes they are. Should be, because you're not, the best, I guess, antidote for ignorance and bigotry is travel, and then also conversation. And also talking to people that, like you do on this podcast, different walks of life, different experiences, and just different realities.
Amen. Well, I mean, that's really the whole purpose of this podcast. So you brought up a very good point. And I want to say from the outset that, the title of this may have shocked you into clicking on it to see, what was going on. And I want to say from the outset that if you're watching or you're listening to this, that none of this is meant to agitate anyone, right? But the problem that I have right now is that, you made a comment about, I talked to so many people. I can't find anyone that supports Trump. However, he got elected. There's something wrong with our society.
Well, I'm not saying I couldn't, but there are people that say that. And I'm like,
well, right. But the point, I mean, if you watch the news, there was no chance he was going to get elected. I almost fell out of my chair the night of election when they called the election for him. I couldn't believe it.
I didn't. I was like, you're saying a lot of stuff, but I don't know.
Well, I was shocked. Yeah. And for the record, I am a conservative. I own a fair number of guns. I won't say how many, but I have a lot. So I have a fair number of guns. I don't want to say how many. I do have assault rifles. I have pistols. I have long range. I've got all that stuff.
And I'll say that I've owned guns in the past. I used to reload my own ammunition. So I know a lot about guns. It drives my wife crazy because in movies, I'm like, you've only got however many rounds in that.
Right, yeah.
I know how many rounds that gun will spit out,
right,
or whatever.
That's a 7-rounder, and then he shot 20 times without reloading.
Yeah, and I'm like, or hey, I know, they'll talk about what it is, and I'm like, nope, that's a this, and she's like, you're nuts.
But real quick, you actually you've experienced kind of a shift in your personal opinion about guns.
Yes.
And you had a very like personal experience when you were younger that has kind of solidified in your mind. So tell the people about that.
Yeah. So I've been in that scenario where, honestly, more than one time. I have a history. We didn't get that podcast saved, but I was a little wild when I was younger. A lot of fighting, a lot of that kind of thing. Growing up in Midwest City, Oklahoma, and so I've had the experience of having, and this is very personal for me. So please don't come if you know me and want to discuss this real hard, but having to make a decision, whether that trigger is getting pulled. And it was very calm. It felt like forever. And, I'm also a Christian. If anyone wants to discuss that, we can as well. But I felt like he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Hey, man, is this what the rest of your life's going to be? Because even if you get away with this, you've shot someone." So I've come really close to Dancing with Fire. And I think, that made me go, whoop, let me get rid of this. I don't have my mentality at the time was violence and aggression. And you mix that in with having a pistol in the car all the time, led to a situation where I was like walking in the front door of a club. And I had a roommate that saved me and a bunch of other people it was over a fight, and again, early 20s, tougher than anyone I knew, blah, 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 just was an idiotic situation that I look back now having children and going, man, like I have one kid.
You almost changed the trajectory of your life.
Of everything.
Right.
Everything would have been different. And again, even if I'd have got away with it, because it could have been deemed self-defense in one situation, this one wouldn't have been, it would have changed everything.
Right.
And so I decided myself to practice a little gun control on Tanner at an early age, because I had no business with that pistol if I was almost there.
Right.
Because I was drunk, stupid thing happened. And, a really bad thing almost happened because of it. And so that kind of changed my outlook on that kind of thing a lot. But another thing, and we talked about the gun show loopholes, I grew up in an area where, Rodney talked in the previous episode about where he grew up. I grew up just kind of south of there, which was a very extreme part of what everyone likes to say is the ghetto. If you guys go to Byron's, down the street, baby. If you go to Big Truck Tacos and eat, I remember when that was where all the hookers hung out. It was a rough area. And I grew up with guys that ended up, killers. One guy that I watched walk into a gun show, young black man that was, and this is not me going, "Oh, that guy looks like a gangster." I'm like, no, Pete was a gangster. I knew who he was and I knew what he was doing. And I watched him buy an AK-47. What was crazy to me when I looked at it, I was like, this guy's got all this stars and bars, and he's even got some Nazi crap out on his table. But none of that seems to matter when
there's money,
cash money hits the table. And he let a guy that I knew was going to take that gun. And it could have been the reason, by the way, that this guy died in prison, because he was a banger. Is what he did, and he took that gun out of there. And that might've been the gun he used to, put himself in prison for life and end up getting killed in prison. His little brother is in prison for life. Those are the kind of guys I grew up around. So this guy just sold it to him for cash, and that's your gun show loophole.
So before we get into that, I wanted you to tell that story in brief so that people understood, kind of where you're coming from. You grew up with, a Oklahoma mentality. I mean, people associate Oklahoma with, kind of a country way of thinking. Whereas, you grew up in an area that, and Rodney explained this, there were a lot of like South Central LA type gang members that got put in prisons in Oklahoma,
Mm-hmm.
and their families would relocate there so that they could be close to them and visit them in prison. Then when they were released, they just stayed. So there were areas of town that, I mean, while we think Oklahoma is more like cowboys and country, there are areas in Oklahoma that are basically like South Central LA.
Yeah.
And you grew up there, and having seen those experiences has informed the way that you feel about guns today. Is that fair to say? So for me, I grew up hunting and fishing. I love shooting sports. I used to every Saturday I got up in the morning and I went shooting. If it wasn't hunting season, I went to the gun range. If it was hunting season, I went hunting. I've always had guns. I've always, been friends with people that had guns and had fun, going to gun ranges and things like that. I've always been a really big supporter of Second Amendment rights. I've been a member of the NRA in the past. I'm a conservative. I'm a Christian. I voted for Trump. Like, by all accounts, I am a conservative, right? But what we found when you and I sat down and started talking about this problem of mass shootings is that not only did we have a lot of common beliefs about how we might be able to work towards a solution, but in some instances, even though I'm a conservative gun owner, I was prepared to go further than you had even
I was like, whoa,
imagined, right? And I think that what's happening is that same thing that causes people to go, like, I talked to tons of people and I didn't find anyone that voted for Trump, yet he won my state, right? That same thing is also preventing people from talking about this subject, right?
Yeah.
And what I find is that there's a lot of misinformation. Not that I'm the world's foremost authority, and people are going to listen to this and say, oh, well, that part's wrong, that part's wrong. And that's fine. I want to hear your comments and we can discuss it. But I'm trying my best because it's too important of an issue. What I find is that people care immensely about things that affect them, and things that don't affect them or that they can't perceive will affect them, they don't pay a lot of attention to, right? So if you are, somebody that has been raised to be against, gun ownership, especially, certain types of guns, then you can't perceive what it's like for the other person. If you're a person that grew up shooting guns all your life, like I have, you can't perceive what the other person is saying. And so we just tend to dismiss each other. But society as a whole is being affected by these mass shootings.
100%.
And so now what we have to admit, because you said something that was crucial, you said there was a 6-year-old that was killed at Gilroy Gardens, and you have a 6-year-old. When Sandy Hook happened, my son was in kindergarten, and it was a classroom of kindergartners that crazy motherfucker went in and started killing. And I just remember crying and being so brokenhearted and thinking, please, somebody in the government do something. And do you know what we got? We got, thoughts and prayers. That's what we got.
Stalemate. And, I'm not going to let this person win this thing. I'm not going to let this win this. And, we got nothing out of the deal.
No change.
Parkland, we had kids that were, protesting. They were high school kids, and now that we're at the point where they've kind of gotten on with their lives. They're like, well, shit, I got to go to college. If no one's going to do anything, I'm going to go to college and try to, do something with my life. There's got to be something. And so, I was talking to Randy about the gun control argument. I am not anti-gun.
Okay.
Again, there's going to be a point where I tell my wife, I'm buying another 1911 45 because I love, shooting that gun. I like holding that gun, but there is a thing that there's what is too much, just what is too much. And so I always give the argument to people that I know that are conservative and say they aren't for, and there's a few of you that might listen to this that may have had this talk with me. I'm not for any form of gun control. It's my Second Amendment right. I'm not for any form of gun control. So I argue that I'm going to get a Ma Deuce 50 caliber machine gun. I'm going to mount it in my dining room. I'm your neighbor, mind you. Your kid's sleeping over here. And if anybody comes in my house, I'm protecting my home.
Right.
Now that seems severe, but people will always be like, you can't do that. So by the way, that's the That's the machine gun on top of the Humvees. That's the machine gun on top of the tanks. That's a mounted machine gun, and that 50 caliber will puncture steel.
It'll go through 5 houses and then kill someone on the backside.
Yeah, at least. And so everyone's like, well, you can't.
They have rounds that go through armor. They got
And I'm like, well, are you trying to control what gun I can have? So that's my argument, that everyone's for gun control. It's just your line's over here, mine might be over here.
Well, first, let's talk about the current state of things. Okay. So because I've had this conversation with multiple people in anticipation of doing this podcast, and I am shocked at how little people know about gun ownership.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to go into a gun store and you want to buy a AR-15, the most common firearm used in these mass shootings,
right?
Which there's a reason for that. If you don't know, AR-15s are the closest thing to the standard issue military rifle that military personnel use. It's the M16 and the AR-15. They shoot the same caliber bullet. They're very similar formats on their frames. AR-15s are extremely versatile. There's an outrageous number of modifications that you can do to them. You can have all different types of scopes and lights and all kinds of things mounted on top of them, infrared scopes, all kinds of things. And you can have multiple things mounted on the same gun. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do with an AR-15. But it also comes potentially with a drum magazine that holds 100 bullets in it. There's all different sizes of clips, 20-round clips, 40-round clips. Used to be limited to 10, but now the high-capacity magazine ban has expired and was not renewed. And so if you were...
in Ohio, he had the 100-round drums, the 2 drums.
Right. Yeah. And so it's a high-velocity round. It creates a lot of secondary injury. So if you shoot somebody point blank, the bullet's likely to go through them, and then whatever's behind them is also going to get hit. So if you're just trying to create maximum damage, it's an excellent gun. Whereas the 1911 that he talked about is a much lower velocity round that tends not to penetrate all the way through the target if you shoot a human center mass.
And by the way, if you're protecting your home, it puts them on their back.
Yeah, it's got a lot of stopping power. But in this case, if you're a mass shooter, you don't necessarily want to stop your victims immediately. You want to inflict maximum damage. So a high velocity round that doesn't kill immediately is perfectly okay. And there's tons of, they're really easy to get. They're, the ammo is readily available and so on and so forth. So that's probably why they're using this gun. For those of you who are gun rights advocates, don't, get me wrong. Lots of mass shootings have been perpetrated with other calibers and other weapons, but it is the most common one. So if you want to go buy one of those, you can. You do have to go through a federal background check called a NICS check. And that only takes a few minutes. And that NICS check checks for your criminal record to see whether or not you've ever been, and this part's important, convicted of a crime that affects your right to buy firearms. Mm-hmm. Okay. The key word is convicted. Okay. And so if you've ever been, convicted of a felony and you go to buy a firearm, they run the NICS check, you're going to get denied, and that retailer will not sell it to you. So that is our current level of protection. That is the background check that happens, and that background check is done on all firearms. There's a second level of firearm, a second class of firearm that requires that you get a federal tax stamp. And that is a firearm that is fully automatic. That is a firearm that has a short barrel on it because there's a barrel length requirement for long guns so that you're not able to conceal them underneath like a coat and whatnot. That applies to what you would probably call a silencer, but are generally referred to in the professional world is suppressors. You can own a silencer / suppressor. You can even buy bazookas and grenades, and
that sounds fun.
You can own all that stuff, but you have to go through the second level check. I don't know all the details. It takes 8 months to a year. You've got to get a county judge or somebody to sign off on it. You got to pay a registration fee, and there's all this process that you go through, right? And so those are the legal processes that you can buy firearms. But currently, the transfer of firearms from private individual to private individual is not regulated. Right now, in the United States, a disgruntled 16-year-old boy who's been planning a mass shooting, who looks old, maybe he can grow a beard. He can go to the gun show.
Or 18, 19-year-old.
Right. I'm just saying, like in your mind, you're like, oh, well, you got to, a 16-year-old who looks old could literally go to a gun show and walk out with a fully tactical AR-15 drum magazine, 1,000 rounds of ammo. And the reason is because if the person that he walks up to buy that firearm doesn't decide personally that they are going to check their ID, then there's no one checking to make sure that they're legally old enough to own a firearm. And secondly, there's no requirement to go through that federal background check when you're selling a firearm from one private individual to another.
Seller,
a private seller, right? And so a lot of people don't realize that. So earlier today, I was talking with somebody and I said something about closing the loop on the gun shows. And he said, absolutely not. And I said, so you're totally okay with a kid on his 18th birthday walking into a gun show and buying, 3 AR-15s with bump stocks, tons of high capacity magazines and all of this ammo. If he has the money, you're okay with that, even though he has been convicted of a crime. What if it's somebody that's on the terror watch list?
Yeah.
Somebody on the terror watch list right now can walk into a gun show and walk out with an AR-15 in magazines and ammo.
Yes.
There is absolutely nothing preventing that from happening in our system. You know what else is not prevented? You could walk into your place of business today and start screaming and say, I hate everybody who works here. I'm going to kill, I'm coming back tomorrow with guns and I'm going to kill everyone that is in this building. And they'll probably call the police on you, and the police will come and they will arrest you. And you will go and get arrested, and the district attorney will decide whether or not they want to press charges, and you're going to be let out on bond. If you have 100 AR-15s and 1,000,000 rounds of ammo at your house, they will literally send you right back to your house, and no one will come to pick up your guns.
I never thought about that.
No one, if we know for sure, if you've made threats, if you have engaged in behavior that we know is a precursor to a mass shooting, if it doesn't matter, if you have not already been convicted of the crime that prevents you from owning guns, there is no mechanism in place to get those guns in custody so that that person who may not have the mental capacity to be able to handle them doesn't have access to them. Right now, you could walk into your counselor and tell your counselor, I'm hearing voices in my head that are telling me that I need to go to work tomorrow and kill everyone that I work with. By the way, I have the means to accomplish this task. I have all the guns at my house, all the ammo and everything, and I'm not sure whether or not I should listen to the voices. And that counselor could call and say, hey, I believe this person is a threat. The police would come arrest you. And again, you would be released on bond and you would go home to your guns and no one would keep you from shooting anyone. So we've got mental health issues. We've got, problems with people that have engaged in risky behavior that we know is a precursor. And there's right now no process to stop that person from having access to the guns to perpetrate the crime. And so that is the current state of things, right? A lot of people don't understand that there is a background check that happens when you own a gun, but they don't know that just because there's a background check, it doesn't catch the people that you think it is catching. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know that there's this next level check that can be done for firearms that are deemed, potentially extremely dangerous to society. Maybe not firearms, but, firearm related equipment that are not necessary for, regular civilian use. But because of our right to bear arms, they've created a safety net, a system to do a higher level of evaluation and make the hoops that you have to jump through to get access to that level higher. as a protection for society, because I think we can all agree that an 18-year-old doesn't need to be able to walk in and buy 5 machine guns on their birthday.
No, you know, you and I were talking, I started with, I've like kind of like, man, where do I have to move my hash mark in the line to get someone to go, I could go for that. It used to be like, no one needs to own an AR-15, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. If you want to own an AR-15, do 4 years in the military.
Mm-hmm.
Carry that thing in a real combat situation. It's where when you want to feel like, you know, American Sniper and all that, and like the badass, yeah, you've done it. You've earned it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've even come off from that. I'm like, look, if you want to own a gun like that, and don't tell me it's for home protection, because again, buy a 45, buy a shotgun. Joe Biden said, buy a shotgun and rip them in half. Democrat. You know,
I feel like he was just trying to sound tough when he said
it
that.
was like the dumbest thing ever.
He was like, and I'll rack that shotgun. I'm
yeah,
like, all right, calm
like,
down,
all right,
Joe.
Joe, settle down.
Yeah.
Joe Biden. But my thing now is like, look, at least admit to me the one reason to own an AR-15. If they're just fun as shit to shoot, you know they are. I've only shot an AR-15 and an SKS back in the day. I shot it once and I never used it again, and then I ended up selling it probably to a private individual.
Part of the problem right here.
Yeah, part of the problem. But, you know, it was like, it's bulky, it's expensive to shoot, it's, you know, dumb. Cool, I shot it once. But they are fun if you got some land and a bunch of watermelons and stuff to go and just shoot shit. I get it, right? We're all little boys on the inside. You give me a slingshot, I'm going to use it today.
Right. Sure.
And so my thing is this: if you want to own one, okay, but there's certain responsibilities to that. There's certain, if you own one and you sell it to some shit that goes out there and mows a bunch of people down in Dayton, Ohio, or El Paso or whatever, you're kind of on the hook for that.
Sure.
Because my dog, if somebody lets my gentle boxer out and she bites a kid and I didn't let her out of my yard, why do I got a problem? You know, I'm on the hook for that.
Right.
And so I can't sell Randy my car without transferring a title. I just feel like you should have to transfer a title. And whether we make gun stores be the place that you go and they act as the intermediary and you know, hold that gun for the background check or whatever it takes, you pay a fee for that. You should be able to sell your gun, but transfer the title, man.
Yeah.
Get that some bitch off of your books.
And from my perspective, you know, from a progressive's perspective, you know, the registration of each individual firearm sounds good. From my perspective as a conservative, the registration of each individual firearm doesn't sound good. However, one thing that I think that we could change right now that would at least be some help would be to stop the private transfer of firearms without there being a federal background check, without the NICS check, right? At least make people go through the NICS check, right?
Well, we got to do something.
We got to do something. So from my perspective, I mean, if you've ever looked at firearms online, yeah, you can buy a firearm online, but you have to send that firearm has to be shipped from the retailer that's selling it to somebody who has an FFL, federal firearms license. And that person is then responsible for making sure that they have all the paperwork in order that shows that they did the federal background check on you. There is no reason that at gun shows you can't have an FFL table that's got, you know, federally licensed people. And typically the transfer fee, they charge $25 or $30 or something like that to process the paperwork and put their name on it and all that stuff. I think we need to close that loophole. I'm not saying you can't sell a gun to another individual. I'm not saying you can't sell a gun at a gun show. I'm just saying that I feel like there should be a rule that if you're going to transfer ownership of a gun, that somebody who is licensed by the federal government to check that person out to make sure they're not dangerous or criminal or have a bad background needs to be involved in the transaction. And we're talking about adding an extra $25 or $30, and maybe the price has gone up. I haven't looked at it in years. What if it's $40? Okay. Well, okay, I'm willing to make everybody who privately transfers a gun pay an extra $40 so that I don't have to hear about another, kid being murdered in their classroom. One of the problems that I have, Tanner, is that when progressives start talking about these problems around shootings, they propose massive changes to our current way of doing things. And so far, I can't think of a single change that they've proposed that would have prevented the shooting that they're talking about.
Well, the proposal of closing the gun show loophole has been.
But how many of the shootings were perpetrated by individuals that bought the guns at gun shows?
Well, this is true.
Not very many.
We don't know.
But a lot of the guns, and this is another thing, and this is America's still racist, people, if you don't know, there's far more people dying in Chicago than are dying in these mass shootings, and no one gives a shit because it's, the south side of Chicago and they're all brown people. Okay. Yeah. A lot of those guns are purchased in private transfers.
Yes.
And a lot of those individuals that are purchasing guns do have prior records and should not have the right to have those arms. But because the law is the way that it is, they know they're not supposed to own a firearm. But here's the problem with gun control, people. If you do not mind murdering someone, you don't mind violating the law that says you're not allowed to have the gun you were planning on doing it with. And so all of this whole idea, and this is another thing we need to discuss, when people start talking about bans, okay? So there used to be an assault weapons ban.
Yes.
Do you know what shooting happened that included AR-15 that was during the assault weapons ban? Columbine.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you could buy an AR-15 and an AK-47 the entire time of the assault weapons ban.
Right. It was just semi.
Owning a machine gun without a license has been illegal since, I think, the early 80s.
Yeah, but I knew guys in high school whose dads knew how to file one.
Yeah, you can file the pins and all that,
like,
but it's a felony if you get caught with one of those. So that's, we already have a law for that. But what people don't understand is they go, oh, well, they should have reinstated the assault weapons ban. It wouldn't have prevented a single one of these shootings. All it does is it prevents certain elements of the gun from looking the way that they are. And I've said to people who said, like, well, why don't we reinstate the assault weapons ban? Because that would protect people. And I go, okay, hold on. If you have a shooter who has an AR-15 that doesn't have this particular type of shroud on it, right? Yeah. And then another shooter that has the shroud that would have been illegal if the assault weapons ban was
shroud doesn't come flying out of it.
Right. Which one do you want to be shot by?
Right.
Neither. Oh, so shocking. You mean you don't want to be shot by a crazy asshole? Okay. Well, that assault weapons ban didn't do anything to keep weapons out of the hands of criminals, right? So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something else. I'm talking about
well, I go so far as to say when we talk about criminals and owning guns, I hear this a lot. It's like, if you ban guns, the criminals will still have them and blah, blah, blah. So you talk about like South Side of Chicago. Mm-hmm. You talk about guys that I grew up with. Mm-hmm. I don't know any of those guys that have walked into a mall or a movie theater or a classroom and this, I think a lot about it because it's like, do we care that, more that it's a bunch of white people at the mall, or do we care more that it's, but when you talk about guys that are in gangs, right, mm-hmm. they are shooting generally at other gang members. Mm-hmm. Now there are children that get caught in the crossfire.
Sure.
There's the problem with that argument. Like I've thought every one of these arguments through, but by and large, the guys that are like the guy I grew up with, mm-hmm. right? If you'd have been like, hey, man, you want to walk in that mall and shoot a bunch of people? You'd be like, man, what the hell's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, no, these dudes are on my turf. Now I'm going to shoot them.
Right.
Now, children getting caught in the crossfire, that's another issue over here that we got to deal with this over here.
Sure.
But I think what we're really talking about right now is going into crowded places with the intent of murdering just all these innocent people that they don't know, they don't care. And your average gang member is like, what the hell is wrong with these white people? And I'm sorry, but that's always a crazy white person that seems to be doing that. And I'm like, that's us. We got the corner on crazy.
Yeah.
So how do we stop that? You know, one of the things that was supposed to go into effect in 2017 was a law that was not going to allow people with diagnosed mental illnesses to have weapons.
Firearms. Yeah. Effectively, they were going to be, if you had a diagnosed mental illness, your name was going to be added to the list that came up when they ran the NICS check.
Right. And so people, you know, talk about liberty and all that. So our president, I'm not going to say names or what party, but decided to veto that and not let that come into law. Now, I get it. There's all kinds of arguments to
PTSD.
What about PTSD, guy that served his country with PTSD, all those kind of things. Could that come up and maybe we go, okay, we're going to let him have this gun, but we need to put certain safety checks into play, right? Or what about, hey, this guy is a paranoid schizophrenic diagnosed. Would anybody on the other end of this camera that knew that a 19-year-old paranoid schizophrenic, easily radicalized, was on the other end trying to buy a gun, and there was a list that said, hey, he's a paranoid schizophrenic. Don't sell him that gun.
Right.
Nobody's going to argue. I challenge anyone that's not
insane,
paranoid schizophrenic, to argue the point that guy should ever be allowed to walk out of an academy with an AR-15.
Right.
It just, I'm sorry, and I'll argue that point all day. It just shouldn't happen because we need to take care of these people. Don't get me wrong. You know, we need to diagnose and we need to help and we need to take care. We don't need just to arm them. I give the point that my son the other day said something to his sister, very threatening. He's a 9-year-old kid, but he's like, the more you talk, the more I want to punch you in the face. And I'm like, he got his head ripped off by dad verbally. And I took his 2 pocket knives. Boy at 8 wanted a pocket knife. I'm a knife guy. Sorry.
Yeah.
I like the right to bear knives. I love them to this day. And I told him, it's not your knife till it has your blood on it. First time he cut himself, he was so excited. But I told him, I said, if you're threatening your sister in that way, then you don't have the mental capacity right now to own these pocket knives. So they are in the console of dad's car. Because what if he's so mad he wants to punch her? What happens if he's 9? He doesn't understand what that would do, right? So,
and we have people in society that have, you know, mental issues that prevent them from having the full capacity that you and I have, and there's not a mechanism in place right now to take their knife away. In this case, a gun. Exactly. Right. So, you know, that's one of the, you know, one of the issues is we do have the background check. We're not using it when we're supposed to. Right. One of the issues is we know that there are mental health issues out there, and for every argument, there's a counter argument. Right. So, the National such and such for Psychiatric Health or something, some organization did a research study on all of the mass shooters, and only 25 of them had previously diagnosed mental health issues. Right. Yeah. It's very 25%. 25%. Yeah. 25%. That's not very small. I mean, that's a quarter. If we reduce the mass shootings by a quarter, I think that would be a good start. Yes. However, it's still 170. Right. But 225 or where we're at now. Right. But yeah, that's not the point. It's something. So the idea, but then they said, you know, if we make a rule that if you have mental health issues, you can't own firearms, then people are going to be afraid to get help with their mental health issues. Right. There's that argument too. And so, you know, I don't know if a guy though that's suffering so much that he's almost resting his firearm on his bottom teeth. Right. Finds his firearm more important than just feeling better. Maybe, but then the people that are the craziest don't go get mental health help because it's voluntary. their family members foisted upon them or their friends foisted upon them because they're
By the way, Randy's not on heroin. He gave blood today.
I did give blood today. Although I do have a scar from donating plasma, and the woman said something about, like, you have tracks, and I was like, those aren't tracks, sweetie. I've seen people that have
I donated
tracks.
plasmas for weed money back
It doesn't look like this. And no, I did not smoke weed in college. So
you didn't inhale. All right, other subject.
That's Bill Clinton. Man, you really threw me off. So there's this problem where, why can't we set up a system where the mental health professionals make the call?
Right.
Because we can't have a carte blanche rule that says that if you go see, I go see a counselor every week.
So let me throw the state of our society why you can't do that. Because the next kid that gets shot, parents are going to sue the mental health professional. We are in such a stalemate, and there's always so many sides to every
Fine, then create government insurance that protects, like for instance,
it's just so tough.
In the real estate, yes, I'm not saying this is an easy problem to solve. I'm just saying that innocent people are dying, people's children are being taken away from them. We have to do something. So, if like in the real estate industry, there's a guy who renders an opinion about the value of the house. He's called an appraiser. He screws up deals. I'm a real estate agent. I've sold almost 500 houses. I've seen appraisals that were completely botched by the appraiser. And do you know that you can file a lawsuit, but it won't be against him because they've set up this system where they're insulated, right? There's like this company that's kind of in between them and the person, and you're kind of suing the company, and there's insurance, and you know what happens in the end? You waste a lot of money on the lawsuit, right? There was a problem. And smart people came together and figured out a way to make it so that the appraiser's opinion could be completely independent, and they were absolutely insulated from influence from the outside, right? I'm sorry. We put a man on the moon. We can figure out a way to empower mental health professionals without, subjecting them to the potential of a life-ending lawsuit, so that they have the ability to put somebody on the list of people that shouldn't currently own firearms.
Well, and I'm hearing like Hannity is saying that we need a armed guard in every hall of every mall and every school, and an armed guard. And first of all, that feels, wow, like talk about giving up your rights.
I don't care.
That's martial law. The problem is
I'm okay
in
with
Dayton,
that.
Ohio, the response time was just over 30 seconds. There was armed police there. He killed 9 people
before the
cops could kill him in 30 seconds.
I'm not sure the cops killed him. They shot him a bunch of times, but he had like armor on. I think he took his own life.
He may have, but they took him down.
Yeah, they stopped him from shooting.
They stopped him from shooting the 10th.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, are we good with armed guys everywhere? I don't know. I'm not with you. I don't want. That feels very China, Russia. Like I got an armed guy watching at all times, everything you do. It's like, man, I think there's other solutions than just,
Well, there's a hard target.
There was the guy in
soft target issue in
Parkland that was the armed guard, and he didn't go in. And everyone's kind of bagging on that guy, but have you ever? Now, there's a few of you guys out there in this land that are cops that may have. So I'm not saying no one.
The cops didn't even go in Parkland.
But I'm saying
you see the video of them riding around in the fucking golf cart, and
man, when an AR-15's going off in a school, there's a special kind of cajones that takes to go, I'm going to go in there right now. I would say I feel like I would, but I've never been in the situation. So it's easy to say that. Every one of us, that man that will be like, I'll go in there, and it's like, maybe
there's something welling up in me. I don't want to get off subject, but that police chief or whatever he was, and he kept getting on CNN, and he was preaching about, assault weapons bans and all that stuff. And then after they gave him all of this airtime, and then the video comes out of him being a little bitch, and he's afraid to go in where the shooter is And he tells all his officers, don't go in, while all those unarmed kids are being murdered. And
By the way, teachers were giving their lives.
Right? They're standing outside with guns and they're not going in. I'm just like, that's the problem. So that's, there's a thing.
But again, that's there, but for the grace of God, go I, because I've never been in that scenario.
Sure.
So that's the worry.
I think I know what I do. I don't know, but if you're paid to protect the public and there's a shooter that's killing children,
you probably should go.
You probably should go in,
100%,
even if you die. After that, I set my son down. I had a conversation with him, and I said, "Son, here's the good news and the bad news. You're a man, and in some ways, like it or not, that gives you a little bit of advantage of you trying to get things accomplished in this world. But it also means that if you're in a building and you hear gunfire, you may have to run towards the fire and not away. That's just... You
got to ask yourself what kind of dude you are.
Right. So, but
by the way, even on the man thing, while they weren't going in, while an armed security guard wasn't going in, there were teachers, a lot of them female, that were giving their lives to shield children.
Right.
So we'll save this for a different podcast, me talking about what teachers are worth in this country.
Sure. So there is a conversation about hard targets and soft targets. And there's a race-related conversation that we can have about, we live in Dallas, Texas. It would take me north of Dallas. Yeah. It would take me 18 to 22 minutes to drive to the city that the El Paso shooter is from, in Allen. Allen has a Walmart. Why didn't he go to the Allen Walmart and shoot a bunch of people? And there's a very good reason for that, because we are in North Texas, and 1 out of every however many people has a concealed carry license. And if you get out of your car at the Allen Walmart in full combat gear, carrying an AR-15 and a bunch of ammo, you're not going to make it into the store before somebody accosts you with another firearm and is prepared to shoot you to stop you. But he went to El Paso, and
the safest city.
And the reason why it was safe for him to go there is because the Hispanic population there are a lot of illegal aliens there. And do you know what illegal aliens don't have? A concealed carry permit, right? And so it was kind of a soft target, even though it was in Texas. I don't think he could have done that in North Texas.
My point is, if they're all rapists and murderers, where the hell was the murderer that could have shot him?
Right.
It's like there was no rapists and murderers in this Walmart. They were just trying to shop for their families. That's
right.
Unfortunate.
That is. And let's talk about that. So there is some political rhetoric that's going on out there, right? And so I'm going to acknowledge something, and conservatives, please don't kill me over this. And then I'm going to say something negative about liberals. So we're going to balance it out. Right. So if Donald Trump, and, if you're a Donald Trump hater, just understand that he's playing chess and everyone else is playing checkers. His whole I'm an idiot and I'm bumbling and I say dumb things is all just a bit. Everything he does is calculated. And so when he says illegal immigrants are this, that, and the other, and we've got to stem the tide and blah, 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 and MS-13 gang members are all drug dealers and rapists and criminals and murderers, and we've got to get these people out of here, he knows that there's a portion of the American public that are going to cut the part out about immigrants and attribute that rapists and murderers and drug dealers rhetoric to the whole category of people, right? And that benefits him because it creates a bunch of, banter on the liberal side. And liberals come up and say, he said that all illegal immigrants are rapists and murderers and drug dealers and killers. And he gets to go on TV and replay the clip and show how dumb the liberals are for saying that he said something he didn't actually say. But he also knows that there's like this group of racist people that want to hear that stuff. And they go, we get you, buddy. We know what you're saying. We're on board with that. Finally, somebody who gets it. And so he gets to make his enemies look bad. He gets to, generate support. But for those of you who are liberal, understand that a lot of the like rhetoric that's coming out from the liberal side right now is very similar to what you heard in China before the communist government took over, in Russia before Marxism took over. And those two political events resulted in more human deaths from any other single action than probably anything in human history. Those are bad things. If you look at, the revolution in France and Robespierre and the things that he was saying, it sounds just like what Bernie Sanders is saying. And you have to understand that there's a political ruling class out there that purport themselves to care about the common person, and the way that they garner votes and they get people to stand up and support them is no different than the way that Donald Trump whips up support in white supremacists and people that are racist. They say things that resonate with disenfranchised individuals, which there's a whole lot more of them than rich people. And what neither side understands is that the racist that lives in Plano that hears you talking about illegal immigrants and how they're, rapists and drug dealers and murderers and they're bad for America goes, oh, cool, it's totally okay to kill them now because they're not actually human like me. Just like the person that hears, some liberal talking about the richest 1% and how they don't care about your human rights, now no longer sees a person that supports Donald Trump as a human being and has no qualms with going up to somebody wearing a Make America Great Again hat and beating them almost to death in public, right? And so there is this political climate where people are fomenting hate in exchange for support and votes, but there's this other ramification that's happening that no one seems to care about, and people are literally losing their lives. And so while I'm not willing to say that, Donald Trump caused the shooting to happen, I'm not saying that at all. I am saying that we have to understand that there are people out there that honestly are crazy, and they hear what these politicians are saying, and they use it to justify forming this insane, plan to hurt other people. And it does matter. And people in positions of authority do need to pay attention to what they're saying and contemplate what all of the ramifications of their actions are, and be more careful. Yeah. And so I want to see that on both sides of the aisle. Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, they all do the same thing. They say things that whip up anger and passion in people, and some of those people are using it as justification to hurt other people. And I want that to stop. So aside from finding a way to get people that are currently under suspicion as being a dangerous individual according to law enforcement or according to mental health professionals, because I think we need to change the rules so that if law enforcement individuals or a mental health professional thinks that you might be a danger, I think that there needs to be a mechanism in place where you get added to a list so that you cannot buy new guns. And I think there needs to be a mechanism in place where your guns are, removed from your care temporarily until things can be sorted out. Obviously, there's got to be appeals processes, reviews, and all of that stuff. But the loss of human life warrants that level of effort from the government. I would support a change in the law so that individuals who are 18 years old can't buy firearms until they're 21.
I would suggest that, but I thought it was too radical. But no, the Republicans said it, so I'm good with it.
I don't know. I mean, I like,
yeah.
Or maybe certain guns. Maybe you can buy a hunting rifle, or maybe you can buy a hunting shotgun, but maybe you can't buy a pistol until you're 21. Maybe you can't buy an AR-15 until you're 21.
Right.
I would potentially support moving some firearms from the current general category that they're in into the category that requires a tax stamp, right? And so, and there could always be.
And don't worry, guys, if that happens, especially a lot of the bourbon guys, your AR-15 just turned into Pappy 23. It's worth
right, and that's one of the other things that
worth so much more. You're
that we
good.
talked about, because a lot of people get on television and talk about a ban, a gun ban, an assault weapons ban, you know, blah blah blah. But you have to. I mean, I have assault weapons, and I don't even like. I've only gone to the gun range once in the last 3 years. Like almost every dude I know has assault weapons. And so what happens when they institute a ban is they don't get rid of everything all at once. They draw a line in the sand and they go, everything from here back is pre-ban, and everything going forward has to follow the new rules. And so a ban isn't going to help us, because there's enough guns in circulation that if somebody's crazy enough that they want to kill people, they're going to be able to get it, right? An overall ban will affect law-abiding citizens more than it will criminals that want to perpetrate crimes. And so I can't get on board with that. So, you know, we need to keep that in mind. But if we could control the transfer of ownership, if we could control so that guns aren't ending up in the hands of people that shouldn't have them, or have indicated that they maybe are not ready to have them right now, just like you took your knife away from your son when he made a threat. So I would be on board with some sort of a change so that, you know, bump stocks definitely should require a class 2 license or whatever, a tax stamp. You should have to go through a higher level check. I would even be on board with some sort of a mental health check. Like, you get a license to own guns. You don't have to register every gun that you purchase, but maybe if you want to own guns, you've got to have some sort of a background check that includes a search of your social media, right? And some sort of a background check where we check to make sure that, and I know this is a super progressive kind of concept, but, you know, I've sat there and contemplated what it would be like to get a phone call to find out that my son got murdered by some crazy fucking idiot, right?
You know what would be worse is for me to get a phone call to find out my son had done that.
Yeah.
I would, and it's so weird to say. No, I don't think it's even that weird to say that I would rather find out my son got murdered with all his friends at a Sonic one night than that my son
had killed
thumbed a weapon out of, you know, because I didn't give him the code to the safe. That was the Sandy or the Parkland kid. He didn't know the code to the safe. Yes, he did.
He got him out of the
safe.
got
the goddamn gun out. He shot all those kids.
Right.
He knew the code.
And so I would support.
I would hate that worse.
Maybe something like that. I would support maybe some sort of a process where you had to have a mental health check and a social media check every year or 2 years or something. I would support, all of the changes with regard to, if something crops up that you seem dangerous, well, now there's a process where law enforcement can temporarily seize your weapons. Yes, there'd have to be an appeals process and all that. You should be able to fight and get your rights back and all that. But, I feel like,
and I know the counter argument to that is, well, anytime they decide to mess with you, they can just come in and, there's all kinds of counter arguments.
Listen, law enforcement doesn't have time to mess with you.
Yeah.
Okay. They are busy dealing with the actual crimes that are out there. Yes, there are bad apples. We could deal with that as a separate issue. Don't tell me that you don't want to subject yourself to the wild machinations of a law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
But you're totally okay with the concept that some random kid can go to a gun show and buy a bunch of weapons and then walk into a Walmart and kill a bunch of strangers. That doesn't make any sense. Like, we need to, there needs to be changes. I'd be okay with some sort of a change where if you want to own, assault weapons, that you have to demonstrate that you own a safe to keep them safe. I would definitely be on board.
You can't adopt a dog without coming to your damn house.
Yeah, if you put your name, if you fill out one of those forms to adopt a dog, and you say that or adopt a cat, I know this for sure, and you say that you have a doggy door, you get blacklisted and you cannot adopt cats.
I'm going to put that on there next to my kids when I try to get a cat. We have a doggy door.
We
Sorry.
got a doggy door.
Get that cat out of my house.
Right. That's actually a good idea. I need to do that. Because my wife's been talking about adopting
animal
cat.
with that.
And so, but I have some friends that had to get a cat off of Craigslist because one time they were filling out one of these forms, and it's like amazing to me that you can fill out a form and say that you have a doggy door in your house, and now you're not able to have cats. But law enforcement and your mental health professional can know that you're totally bananas.
You could point a gun at a baby.
You can point a gun at a baby, and you're still able to go buy guns, and no one comes to your house and tries to take your guns. That is not okay. Change has to happen. I would be okay with, I don't know. I don't know what all the answers are, people. I
think this podcast could be like 4 hours.
But I will say this, like, if you're a conservative person and you support gun rights and the Second Amendment, that's great. So do I. I want you to be able, like, whatever, if you want to have an AR-15 with a suppressor and a high capacity magazine and all that stuff, I want to figure out a way that you can still do that. But also, we keep that same gun out of the hands of somebody that might be dangerous, right? And I
think you do too.
I think you do too. Like, but if you're a liberal and you hear what I'm saying and you go, no, we need a ban and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, like,
there's so many on the streets as a progressive. I hate the word liberal because I'm like, I don't know what that means. I like a liberal pour.
A liberal pour.
Liberal pour of whiskey is great. As a progressive, as somebody that wants to see progress made in this country, as somebody that, like, wants to see us just get better. I don't know how you think banning weapons. There's so many out there right now, and it's all grandfathered. The one thing I will say, when you talk about banning high capacity magazines, you guys that own them, they're going to be worth a lot of money. You should vote for that. Because why? Because people want them. And if they go higher in price, maybe this dipshit that wants to go to Dayton, Ohio doesn't get his hand on it.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, there's only been one wealthy shooter recently, and it was the Las Vegas shooter.
Yeah.
What I want for you guys to do, if you made it through to the end, congratulations, is I want you to talk with somebody, maybe somebody who thinks differently than you about what you're willing to do.
If you're buying drinks, I will sit down across from you.
Yeah. If you want to come into where Tanner works, which we're not going to mention because I don't think that's a good idea.
We'd like to not take that stand.
Yeah. But if you know who Tanner is and you want to come and have a drink with him, but talk with someone, because that's the problem. No one's communicating. I feel like this should be a voting issue, right? Like, everybody wants to talk about Donald Trump and Russian collusion and, investigation after investigation after investigation. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't care if Donald Trump gives Vladimir Putin a blowjob on the front steps of the Kremlin. If Donald Trump can pass laws.
Gross.
Yeah, gross. If Donald Trump can pass laws that are literally going to protect our children from these mass shootings, then I'll support him, right? Like, all of this stuff about political this and political that and whatnot, it's all puffery, it's all positioning, but we have real problems that need to be dealt with, and we can't get it done if we only talk with people who think like us and nobody's willing to budge from their position. And that's what you and I's relationship, that's really how it started, is talking with somebody else. And what we found is that I'm proposing things that are way more progressive than you are.
I was like, holy shit.
Right. But I mean, I'm upset. Like, oh, yeah. And it's like, as long as an American, I can still go out and buy a machine gun with a silencer if I want one. Right. I want there to be some change. Ultimately, we have to keep the guns out of the hands of the people that want to hurt individuals. Right. So, anyways, I love you guys. Feel free to make comments below. If you're making comments and they are inflammatory and they're creating drama, I'm going to delete them. So don't do that. This is too serious of an issue for us to just become entrenched in our political beliefs. If you want to make comments about legitimate suggestions on what could be done, then I want to hear that. And I pray that everyone listening to this wants to hear that.
For sure.
So anything you want to add before we roll out?
Man, conversations. Just have conversations. Don't just discount the other person because they've got an Obama t-shirt on, or they're, think differently than you. They've had different realities in life. Have that conversation.
Yeah.
Get to a middle ground. Figure out. I will promise you will find 90% of what you believe to be kind of in line with the other person. Have the conversation. Don't be an asshole.
All right. Well, as always, love you guys, and see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk.